In this video, or in this live stream, if you're watching this on Twitch, I'm going to be live reviewing a few different projects from some of my YouTube subscribers. If you're watching this on YouTube, it'll probably be up in a day or two. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. If you're watching this on Twitch, make sure to follow me, all that good stuff, and vice versa. If you're watching this on YouTube, you should definitely make sure to follow me on Twitch so you don't miss any of this stuff. What I did was I went on Twitter and on my YouTube, and I basically asked my subscribers to send me some code, and I would review it. So I got 5 projects here. We'll see how many I get to in this stream. Probably all of them, but we'll see. And I'm just gonna clone them, take a look at them, and review them. Let's do an overview of which ones I've picked. So we have JLarky React Lazily. We have Wordle, which appears to be a Wordle clone. Notes Full Stack, which is a full stack application. I think it's going to be Express on the back end and React on the front end. I could be wrong. I have to look at it in a second. Then we have GitHub Profile README Maker, which I think is a Next.js application. And then we have React Tailwind, which I haven't fully looked at this one yet. So I think what I'll do is just pick this one to start with. So this is Wordle. And the reason why I'm picking this one first is because I just recently did a Wordle clone myself, and that is up on the YouTube in case you want to watch it. So let's start by cloning the project. Actually, is it possible that there is a mistake going on right now? We go to the source folder, app.js. Indeed, this is literally just a plain create React app project. It makes me wonder if I probably should have picked a different one from them, because this appears to not actually be the code. Is there a branch? Okay, GH pages. That's the branch. Okay, you got me with that one. But it makes me wonder, is this just the compiled code? It looks like I might not even be able to review this, to be honest. So I apologize to, I don't know if it's IM Sutter or LM Sutter. We'll have to get a more specific one next time. So I'm going to move on to the next one. Just if you want me to review your code, I'll go ahead and give you another shot on that. Just send me the exact repository that you want me to review, and I will do that. So moving on to the next one, we are going to clone Notes Full Stack. Let's do that. So this is Andrew Townsley, web developer based in Colorado. Looks like Denver, Colorado. So let's clone this. I think I copied that. Did I just copy that? I think I did. Let's just make sure. Boom. And then code open that. Let's close the other one. Okay, so I've got this open and I want to just run npm install. Okay, actually there's a package JSON on the outside here, and I'm willing to bet, yep. So there's a package JSON on the top level, and there's also a package JSON in the client. Is there also a package JSON in the server? Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. So what's the difference between this one and the one that's on the server? So the dependencies on the one inside the server folder has cores.env, express, mongoose, and morgan. Does the one on the outside have the dependencies for both the front end and the back end? No, it does not. So this is really interesting. I'm wondering, I'm going to go straight to the README and see how I'm supposed to set this. There is not a README. Okay, so that is another thing, right? So if you have a project, I would always say just take the extra 5, maybe 10 minutes and just make sure you do a README for your project, even if it's just something that you're like a side project or something, just in case someone wants to look at it, maybe a potential employer, and they see this and they're like, all right, how do I run it? Or what is this in general? Like I see Notes Full Stack. I'm assuming it's a Notes app with a back end and a front end. But, just from that, it looks like I'm going to have to figure out manually how to set this up. So I'm going to run, just looking at this external, like this outside package JSON, the main is server.js, but there isn't a server.js file out here. So I'm assuming that the one inside the server folder is the package JSON that we really want. So I think that you could probably safely delete this package lock JSON and this package.json. I don't know if these are even necessary whatsoever. So I'm not going to worry about that. Instead, I'm going to cd into the server directory, npm install here. And then once this finishes installing, I'm going to go into the client folder. So cd client, and then run npm install there. That one's going to take longer because it has to install React and it has to install all those other dependencies. While that's happening, I just want to go back to this and edit note function working. Okay, so what is this file? We open it up. It says 0 lines. So this is a 0-byte file. I'm not sure what this file is doing. It might have something to do with Heroku and the way that this is being deployed. Can't say for sure, but there is an environments thing here, deployed. Okay, give me a second. Yeah, it's definitely a Heroku application that I don't think I can view the running version of. But all right, so we have 114 vulnerabilities, 12 of them are high. So I would always keep your dependencies up to date, but I understand that you don't because this is not actually a production application, just something you worked on the side. Totally get it. All right, I need to open up so that I can run, I'm assuming I need to run both the server and the client. So npm start on the client, and then I'm gonna go to the server folder on this side and run npm start here. And let's see if we can actually get this thing running. Okay, server's running, localhost 8000. So the backend appears to be running, but it says must be the URI parameter to open URI must be a string got undefined. So we're going to take a look at that in just a moment. It might be that we need a .env file. So another thing that you would want to include in that README. Okay, you would definitely want to make sure to include how to get set up in your README. Now I'm going to assume that this is not going to load properly because the backend appeared to not boot properly. But let's just see what happens. All I'm getting is a loading screen. Cool. So we have the UI. Looks pretty good. I think this looks pretty good. Note flicks. So I'm gonna go ahead and say it's safe to assume that if I were to try and post a note here, let's just say test note 1, hello world, category, I don't know, let's do home, and then save the note. It should fail. Did we get an error? Connection refused on 8000 API note. It's weird that it didn't come up in the network tab, but whatever. So we're getting a lot of logs. So that's another thing. You want to make sure that before you push this to GitHub, you get rid of all of your console.logs. Looks like there's a few console.logs that are happening in the app.js file. Always make sure you get rid of those. Error cannot create note. So at least you're doing some error handling. So let's figure out what this server error is here on this side and see if we can get this thing running. So server, and then this is probably happening in the server.js file. I'm gonna say, I think it probably is looking for, it wants me to set up Mongoose. So the URI parameter to open URI must be a string got undefined. Make sure the first parameter to mongoose.connect or okay, so let's look at what the URI parameter is. URI. Okay, what is the method it wants? Mongoose.connect. Let's see if we can find this method in this project. All right, it's in db.js. So in db.js, we are passing in, it is definitely expecting a config file, a .env file. So what is it looking for precisely? Let's see. Mongo URI. So I don't think that I'm going to be able to necessarily run this project locally, but I can at least review the code because I don't have the .env file. Something you would definitely want to make sure that you include instructions on in your README. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and go through and just look at the code and review it, even though I can't run it. So let's start with the client. Okay, so this is looking like a React application. If we go to the public, it does appear that they went ahead and removed the create React app. No, still some of the create React app boilerplate stuff is in here. That's fine, but at least they updated the title. That's cool. And it shows some level of understanding of how the framework works. So that's good. Something I would definitely expect if I was reviewing code for someone that was either like junior or maybe low mid level developer. So app CSS, if I go in here, I think a lot of this is definitely code that they wrote. So that's good. Let's start at the entry point of the application. They are importing React DOM, and they have a context. Okay, so they're using the context API, it seems. That's cool. If I scroll through this, it looks like there's a large amount of state that's being stored in this context. So it almost looks like they're using this context as a global state sort of thing, that's one way of doing it. And I definitely feel like that's an acceptable way to approach it. Although lately, for apps this small, I have found that I prefer to keep the state as localized as possible in the components that are using them, and then share state through context only where absolutely necessary. But I'm not saying that, that's more of a nip. As an application grows, you need to be more and more cognizant of how you're using context. And so that's just something I would mention now. Okay, starting here, because basically if we look at the entry point, they're rendering the app component inside of context. So let's take a look at the app component. We have some stuff from React. They're using Axios. Okay, let's see. I'm going to take a look at Axios, and I'm noticing I would always set up a prettier or an ESLint to try and make sure that you don't commit code with stuff like this white code, this excess white code here. You don't really want that. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything per se, but you want to keep your code, clean, and it seems like there's no prettier config or anything like that. So I would just make sure that you always have something like that set up as well, so that when you save, it strips the white space, it formats the code to make it look good, make sure that there's no lines that are too long. stuff like that. So going through here, we have a function component that is using, okay, what is this note state? What is this? This is coming from the context. So I'm going to actually open up this. Using context like this isn't really the best way to do it, but again, it's a nitpick. I would say that this is perfectly fine for now, but I prefer to use more of like a hook pattern right here. I'm not going to go too much into that detail because it's a nitpick, but this is okay. So notes array, filter category, set notes array, and filter complete. So you're getting the notes array. So I'm assuming a list of notes out so that you can display a list of notes. Filter category is probably it's probably this. So you can filter by show all, completed, uncompleted, or no, it's this. It's this. So okay, so the category that you set here in the beginning, you can filter by that. That's cool. That is a good feature to have. I'm happy about that. So we have that filter category. We have filter complete. Now, I'm not sure what that is yet. It might have something to do with like fetching that asynchronously. We'll have a look at that in a minute. So here's a console.log. You want to get rid of this console.log before you push this stuff to GitHub. That's another thing that you can set up in like a linter. Like if you have ESLint, then you don't have to worry about forgetting this. It will tell you, if you run the lint command, it'll say, hey, you forgot to remove this, or maybe it'll highlight it red, that sort of thing. All right. They are using an effect and set notes arrays in this, and they're using Axios to call the backend that I was not able to run, unfortunately, but I'm assuming that it's going to hit a database and get, that's interesting because I don't see anything in particular that says which note to get, right? So this URL doesn't seem to have any information about a note specific ID or anything. So what is this doing? Okay, so this might be just getting all of the notes. Okay, yeah, so set notes array. So whatever this URL is right here, this is hitting, I guess, the Mongoose backend, and that backend is returning an array of notes. And then once we get that, we're setting it here. But I'm just going to go ahead and say you don't need Axios for this. Okay, so you installed Axios. I mean, that's fine. That might be your preference. That might be the library you're used to using. But you could also just use Fetch, which is native to browsers. And then you wouldn't have had to import this third-party library. There might have been another reason I'm not aware of, but this is something I would say in a code review is say, hey, is there a reason that you're using Axios, or could you just be using Fetch here? And then if there's an error, we get a catch, which that is where this is coming from, it seems. Error could not create note, must be this log here. And this is line 26. I can verify that by looking here. It actually says line 72 of context. So we're not even getting to that particular error message. So this error is coming from line 72. Kind of curious about that. Line 72 in context. That error is coming from when I tried to submit the note. So this is a function called new note or save note. Okay, I don't want to get too distracted here, but I'm getting it. All right, that's cool. I would get rid of that. Sidebar, there's a sidebar component, and I'm going to take a look at that in a second. And this is, I guess this app component is the higher order component that contains the sidebar and the note list, which is going to be, I'm assuming this is the sidebar and this is the note list. I didn't see a component for this guy up here at the top, this header. I'm wondering if that's just part of the note list. I'm assuming it is because it looks like that's where handle search is being passed in, and there's a search bar here. So if I open up note list, it looks like there is a note search component. So it is indeed. I would actually personally think it would make more sense to isolate this component in that app.js file so that there's three components. There's the sidebar, then there is this header, and then there is this note list section. Because the way that I think about it is each of these three components could, if this app scaled to a huge degree, like maybe something at the level of Evernote or Notion, each of these sections could potentially have their own team dedicated to that section. And so by only making it two sections and then breaking that other section into components in here, you're kind of tightly coupling that functionality to this. But it's just another nitpick because this app isn't at that level at this scale yet. So anyway, I think so far, I think that this is okay code. I definitely have a bunch of nitpicks, but I think this seems to be mostly functional other than the fact that we do need a .env file, which I do not have information on how to set up in the README. So I think that there's things to improve upon, but overall you have a pretty cool looking application. I think that this would be, if you just put a little bit more work into it to polish some of the things that I'm noticing here, you could actually have this would be a pretty good little app to show potential employers if you're trying to look for a job, or just something that can give you better confidence as you are in your job search, if that's what you're currently doing. But yeah, this is pretty cool. I actually like this. So I'm going to go on to the next one here. So thank you, Andrew Townsley, for that. I hope that you see this and make the improvements and just keep going. I'll potentially keep an eye on this repository just to see if you add a README and fix some of those things. But yeah, good job on that. Let's look at the next one. Let's do this GitHub profile README maker. So this is Vishwa. I could be pronouncing this wrong, Vishwa. I don't want to try to pronounce it because I hate mispronouncing names, and I'm sorry. I don't want to butcher your name, but I'm looking at this and I'm actually really impressed with this one. Okay, so this is a GitHub profile README maker. A couple things to look at that I'm really impressed with. One, we have a demo link. We'll look at that in a second. Two, we have a pretty good description about what it is. We have a very good README, excellent README. But that makes sense, right? Because this is a README maker. So this is probably the README that was generated by the README maker for it, maybe. We'll find out in a moment. And I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at this demo and just see what it does. Oh, and it has a license, it has everything. Yeah, this is a really good right off the bat. So good job so far, Vishwa. Okay, so this is my browser problem. I need to reinstall Chrome, but all right. So best profile generator, really digging the SVGs. I'm assuming this is an SVG. I'm going to pop in here and just look, right? This is a image SVG, correct? Yeah. So you're using an SVG as an image source. I wouldn't do that. Actually, I would use like an actual native SVG element if you can, because you get a lot of really good benefits in performance and file size if you do it that way, but just a nitpick. So let's look at my username, port.exe, and submit it. Before I submit it, I just want to scroll down and see what else is on this landing page. This is a really good looking landing page. So the credits, we believe in giving credit where it's due to all OG creators. We see you and thank you for creating these awesome tools. So these are the people that must have created the individual pieces that this tool is using. Okay, so this tool appears to take these other tools and put it into one, giant tool that does this for you. So submitting, add a small introduction. I'm just going to do something really simple that says, this is just a test, LOL. Really love the aesthetic here, this mint green. Flex your GitHub stats. Okay, so one thing that is sticking out to me right now is that, okay, it gives me an A+. First of all, I don't know what the A+ means. Is it just saying I'm doing a good job? And second off, there's this circle that goes around. It's almost like a gauge. An A+ is usually like the best you can get, maybe S if we're talking ranks, but this is like the best you could typically get in a rating, and it's only halfway full, which makes me think that this circle doesn't really do anything, but I would just take a look at that. Let's see, total contributions, 1,586, longest streak, most used languages, HTML. Really? I wouldn't have thought that. I thought it would have been JavaScript for sure, but maybe there's some compiled stuff in there. But let's change the theme. Let's go to Synthwave. I like that. Ooh, this is like my VS Code theme. Nice. What do these buttons do? Border? Okay, I think that got rid of the border. Okay, cool. I like that. So you can actually design it a little bit. Lifetime commits. I don't know what that doesn't. Oh, it's a little slow, but it worked, I think. Yes. Private commits. If you click that, changes it to, I don't think that actually did anything. When I clicked that, it refreshed, but it didn't appear to actually do anything. And also look, this A+, I don't know what this circle around this A+ means, because now it's slightly different than it was a minute ago. I don't know, maybe it's just an optical illusion, but cool. I still really like this. Going through, I can add some usernames and stuff. I'll add my Reddit username, which is port.exe. I will add my Twitter username, which is also port.exe. Oh, there is a Twitch. Nice. Port.exe, and then YouTube, port.exe, of course. Next, add tech that you use. Well, I use CSS. I use, where's JavaScript? I use JavaScript, TypeScript, Ruby. I think that's pretty much it. Frameworks and libraries, I'll just select React if I can find it. Being able to search through this would be nice, because this is a lot to look at, right? That's one thing I would say this could be improved upon is, there we go, there's React. It's kind of hard to find what I'm looking for. Nginx, databases, you got Firebase on here. That's not really a database, so I'm not gonna nitpick that too much. Adobe After Effects, sure. Premiere Pro, that's what I'm gonna edit this YouTube version of this video on. And then other, obviously Gradle. Well, I might actually say no to that. I've used it, but I'm not a Gradle master. Theme for the badge. Is that a Spotify logo? That is definitely a Spotify logo. I'm confused. Why is there a Spotify logo right there? That is definitely a Spotify logo. I do not understand that part. Okay, going to the next part. Buy me a coffee username. I don't have any of these, so I'm gonna skip that. Additional stuff to add. This is pretty sweet. Let's do that. Oh wait, add GitHub trophies. I'm just gonna kind of blaze through the rest. Oh, so this is what it looks like. And then if I click copy code, oh, you can just download the markdown file. That's what I would prefer to do. Let's just open this. So it just generates the markdown for it. I think I have in VS Code a visualizer for readmes or markdown, I mean. So I'm gonna actually just use this project here, and I can't remember how to do it. I think there's a command for it. Markdown preview. Oh wait, it's this open preview. There we go. So this is what it would look like. This is what it would look like if it was on GitHub. I think this is pretty awesome. Okay. I think this is actually really cool. Let's look at the code. In order to look at the code, I need to clone the project. Well, I don't have to, but I'm going to, because I prefer to look at it in my code editor. So backing out of here, git clone. For this one, oops. For this one, I'm not going to actually npm install and run it locally because there was already a good demo on. Since there was already a good demo, I don't really need to run this locally, although I could at least test to see if it compiles locally. But it's a Next.js app. It seems like it probably would just compile. I'm not going to worry about that as much as I'm just going to look at the code on this particular. So already, just going to go ahead and say, so far, doing really good. Let's look at the structure of the project here. So starting with the pages, index.js, that's the home page. And I'm going to zoom out just slightly so that I can see a little bit better. I know that people watching this might have a harder time seeing it because the text might be small, but let me know in the chat if it is too small. I will make it bigger. So this has a bunch of stuff in the header, I guess, for fonts, and I never like seeing dangerously set inner HTML. I never like seeing that, but I know that it's necessary from time to time. I hate seeing that. Google Analytics in there. I don't know if that's necessary for this project, but you know, to each their own. Yeah. So pretty good headers, a little bit of SEO stuff going on. Then in the body, there's just 3 components. You got the nav bar, the home page, and the footer. So if I go back to the project demo page, we can see that this, I'm assuming, is the header or the nav bar. Wait a minute. This is the nav bar, the home page, and what is the footer? If I go to the footer, which part is the footer? I guess this part down here. I could probably right click and inspect and see if there's an ID that tells me, but it's not that important. I can hover over it and just kind of see from here that the nav bar is this piece. The home page goes all the way down to there, and then the footer is that. Okay, cool. Good enough for me. Let's take a look at the home page. The home page is where the good stuff is. So we have a bunch of imports for things that don't appear to be third-party libraries. That's good. I don't know if you just installed them, cloned them into your own repo, or if you coded all of this yourself. We can look at that in a moment. So you have some state here. This is a function component, bunch of comments. I really like that you put a bunch of comments in here. Okay, so this is deprecated. Using key code, I think, is deprecated. Yeah, so key code is deprecated. Instead, you would want to use key. So you could do event.key is equal to enter, like that. So that's the new way of doing it. I would change it to that because number 13, key code, that is no longer a thing anymore. So just keep that in mind. You may want to go back and update that. Cancel the default action if needed. That's good. But I would say personally, I guess it's not that important. I would not call this variable event. I would just call it E or EVT because you might have some sort of naming conflict depending on how the application is structured. But totally just a nitpick. Then we have trigger the button element with a click. So this is it's auto clicking it for you. Interesting. Okay, so I would not have done it like this. Instead, I think what this is doing is you type in your username here, and if you click enter, it's manually with JavaScript clicking this button for you. I would have just used a form for that, right? So if you just used a form for this, you would have gotten that functionality automatically, right? So that would have been the way you should have done that. Okay, so that's my first huge gripe is I would completely refactor this to not try and click the proceed button. I'm assuming if I right click on this, the ID for this is proceed, right? Button ID is proceed. Yeah, so that is not the best practice. I would definitely refactor this to be a form. And then when you click enter, the submit functionality, you can write this logic here. You can write inside of, the whatever click functionality you have set up for that button will run on submit instead. I would set that up. I would not do it like this. On next, I don't know where that gets called. I'm assuming on next is the function that gets called when this gets clicked, but we can verify that in a second. I'll highlight it and see where this is being called. On next is indeed the on click. So I would actually, again, I would remove this. I would set this to type equals submit, and then I would wrap this div inside of a form. And then for the form, I would have a on submit handler that called the on next function instead of doing it like this. So that would be a huge, huge, huge improvement for you. So when you do submit, it's grabbing the value from the actual text ID. So this is a React application. I know it's Next.js, but this is a React application. You don't want to be reaching into the DOM with document.getElement by ID. Instead, what you should be doing is setting the input value with state. So let's say up here at the top, I'm going to show you an example. Okay. So we have const username. If I can get this inside of there, that would be nice. And then set username equals use state. Go ahead and initialize that as an empty string. And then I would go into your input down here and set the value equal to username. Then you no longer need this ID at all, I think, unless you're using it for tests or something, but you would no longer need this because you're no longer reaching into it with document.getElement by ID. And instead, what you would be doing is there would be an onChange here. So onChange, you would take the event and say that set username, you would call set username equal to e.target.value. So now whenever this input value changes, you're updating the state, and now you don't have to reach into the DOM anymore. And when you're trying to get the user, you no longer need this at all. You can use username because you have that state. You can be using username now. You see what I'm saying? So that is how you should have done that. Let's go back to where we were. All right, so it looks like there's some cleaning of the string. It cleans up the string a little bit, removes empty white space. And then I don't know why there's a reassignment of the variable username here. That's strange to me. I don't know what this is. I don't know what the purpose of this. You're setting what appears to be a global variable. I'm not sure. I'm going to get rid of that because I just wrote that. But this right here, I am confused about what this is, what the purpose of that is. Okay, so I wrote that, so I'm not worried about that. What is that doing? Well, I don't know. Then we have set is visible to true. So what is visible doing here? It is showing the about me. Give me just 1 second while I rationalize what's happening here. So there's a form. Your setting is visible to true, and then you get this. Okay, I would rename that variable for sure. I would say maybe about me visible. Set this to like about me is visible or something like that, just because I think that it would make more sense. But at the same time, I'm wondering why this isn't just a separate component, right? Because if I refresh this page, what I would expect in terms of the architecture of how this app is set up is I would submit this. I would say port exe. And in the component that's handling this, this would just be like a form component instead of a higher order component. And when I submit this, it would go out to the server, get the information about me or whatever. And then once that information comes back and we know that it's submitted, while it's doing that, by the way, you should be disabling the form and showing maybe a loading spinner here. And then this should be a completely separate component that it routes you to, or different page even. Like this should be maybe /about me or something like that. This would be a completely separate page that it routes you to, and it keeps that information on hand. You get what I'm saying? Or it doesn't have to be a separate page. It could be a separate component, and then you could have your own routing mechanism. Anyway, just doing the switch like this here, I'm not massive fan of that. And then it looks like that's how, I don't know what the alert is. Maybe if I do a username that doesn't exist or something, I highly doubt that exists if I submit that. Okay, we don't even get an alert here, but okay. So I think at this point I have a good enough understanding of the coding skill level. So let's just say that I am an employer. You're submitting your GitHub link. I find this. I'm trying to figure out whether or not I want to give you an interview. At this point, I would say absolutely. I would definitely give you an interview, but I would definitely be drilling into these things that I'm talking about. Like, why would you be doing this? Because to me, it shows that there's not a very strong level of understanding of the React framework, but there's a pretty decent understanding of the JavaScript language going on here. So to me, the decent understanding of the JavaScript language in general is more important than just simply knowing and being like a master of a framework such as React. So I would look at this and I would say, okay, definitely need some work in understanding how to use React, but definitely a lot of potential here. I would definitely give this person an interview. Overall, I think the product itself is pretty cool. I think the design looks really good. I'm glad that it uses all these kind of other tools and kind of builds this awesome looking README, but definitely some things to work on in the code. And I just want to say good job and thank you for letting me use your code, Vishwa. So I'm going to move on to the next one. I think there is two more. So there's two more. There is Mike Fox 17, React Tailwind, and then there is Jay Larkey with React Lazily, which I'm going to save for last here. So let's go on to Mike Fox 17. And before I do that, let me just CD out of there and get ready to clone this project. So I'm going to clone it, git clone, and CD into it. Is there a lot of, that seemed like it took a long time. Invalid argument, cannot create directory. Wait a minute. Okay, first of all, I'm seeing a misspelling in your, hold on, is it? Oh, wow. Okay, so that's not a huge deal, but I just noticed that this is misspelled. It should be backend. There should not be an F or a T on there unless there's a reason for that, but I'm not aware of what that reason would be. Anyway, for some reason, it did not, it tried to create a directory. Well, let's see, did it at least create React Tailwind? It did. If I ls inside of here, it created the folders. Okay, so if I had to guess, if I go into the backend folder, somewhere in the package.json is a hook, maybe some sort of something somewhere in that project. There was a, like, I forget what you call it, but when you install a package or when I'm having a brain blankage. When you install a package or clone a project, sometimes there will be a hook of little bit of code that needs to run in order for it to work properly. But I don't understand why that didn't work. So I just tried to clone the project and it did not fully clone. Well, I'm not going to gripe too much about that. It didn't create the front end folder, it seems. It only created the back end folder. I'm gonna CD out of this and remove it and try it again. How about that? Let's try that again. Oh, I'm trying to do Linux stuff. Wait, I should be able to do Linux stuff. Is it? Maybe that's what it was. So straight off the bat, this particular project is giving me some issues. So I'm gonna try to clone it one more time. If it doesn't work, then we're gonna just dig into it on GitHub. Okay, well, it didn't remove it, so. Okay, well, it removed all the contents. How about I download this as a zip? Let's just do that. So what I want to do is extract this. Let's extract this to my normal folder. So give me one moment while I find it. Almost done. All right, so I'm extracting it now. It seems like this is a very large file. Am I wrong? If I go to my downloads and just see, it's a 60 megabyte file. I guess that is pretty large. Did you include your node modules in this by chance? You did. Okay. So this is what's happening. This is exactly what's happening. So the first thing I want to say, Mike, is you never want to commit your node modules ever. You want to have a git ignore file, and you want to make sure that you ignore the node modules. This folder, you do not want to commit that. All right. So I just want to make sure you understand that. Never commit your node modules. Looks like the node modules were only committed for the back end. That finished, so I'm going to CD into that. It didn't work. We got an error. Okay, it's not letting me do it. I'm going to have to apologize on that. It's not going to let me see it because I could just open it and, wow, Google Chrome is not my friend today. I'm just going to open it in the little VS Code editor that GitHub lets me. I won't be able to run the project locally. Oh, wow, github.dev. If we go back to the project, React Tailwind. Okay, so there's a README, but it doesn't really tell me. This is his blog. Okay, so actually, I bet you, if I go to this website here, mikefox.io. Okay, so this project is this blog. So there is a working demo on the internet. What I would do, Mike, is I would go over to your about and I would edit and add a link that is visible right here that shows that you can go and visit this project's website. Also, calling it React Tailwind, is there a reason for that? I'm not sure that it makes sense to call that React Tailwind. So just something you should be aware of there. Also, make sure that you fix the backend spelling here, unless the FT is there for a reason. And definitely update your README, and also make sure to definitely get rid of that node modules folder. It should not be there. Make sure to add that to your git ignore. With all of that said, I'm going to duplicate this tab and reopen it in the little VS Code editor. It just seems to be taking forever, which I'm going to refresh. Maybe it was just hung on something. Come on. You got this, GitHub. It might be trying to load that node modules folder, and that's why it's taking so long. So I'm going to just go to the website and kind of review this. I like this blog. it doesn't feel it feels like Tailwind, but it doesn't feel like it definitely. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not too over the top where it's got all these fancy, crazy things going on, but it's not so overly simple that it's boring and cookie cutter. I'd say it's right there in the middle. From bartender to web developer. Now that's cool because I was also a bartender as well while I was learning how to code. So I can relate to you there. Read my hot takes. So I'm assuming this is blog posts. If I click it, it takes me to a blog article. One thing that I would say is you're going to want to format your text a little bit better to where the font size is a little bigger, and I would increase the line distance, the distance from the lines here, so that it's a little bit easier to read. Check out my work. Okay, so there you did a Pomodoro app. So this is like your portfolio here. So if I click live demo, it takes me to a Pomodoro app. That's pretty cool. So this is going to count down to, I'm assuming, the timer itself, because a 10-second Pomodoro would be pretty crazy. Wow. Okay, so just going to assume that maybe you can edit this or something. I don't know. A 10-second Pomodoro seems low. React Markdown. This might have, I wonder. Okay, so React highlights and routing. This one sounds cool. Let's take a quick look at that. Home. I am the homepage. About features. So this is just demoing. Looks like probably the React router. Yeah. Okay. Not super stoked on this design here, but at least you have a submit, like a form. I wonder, I'm going to send you a message.com. Hey, I am reviewing your code live on Twitch right now. LOL. Submit. Cool. So now he knows, although he already knew because I got his permission on Twitter. But anyway, that's not really working. It's not loading there. So I'm going to have no choice but to just jump in and look at it manually. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this one just because of that. So I've already reviewed several parts of it, places where you can definitely improve. I would take those opportunities and do the things that I mentioned. But let's look at the main.jsx. That's interesting that you named it main.jsx instead of index.jsx. What is going on with that? What sort of configuration do you have set up here? Are you using Create React App? It looks like I don't think you are. What are you using to build this? What Vite? You're using Vite. Okay. I think that's how you pronounce it. Is it Vite or Vite? I think it's Vite. Vite. So there's an index.html. There's a root div here. You are using a main.jsx. You have an app component. The app component is loading the browser router, and then there's the navigation. All right. And then if there's two routes, there is the homepage and then the post page, which appears to be like if you're looking at a blog article. So when we were looking at your blog article, it was on this particular component, the single post component. Otherwise, if you're on the homepage, it's just that long homepage. That's cool. One thing that I would say is there's no reason to be returning a fragment here whatsoever. I would get rid of this fragment because you already have just one component that you're returning with children inside of it. There's no reason for you to have these React fragments here, so I would return that. And then another thing is you're not doing anything in this component other than rendering JSX, so you could actually completely get rid of this return and this curly brace and just have this function return this JSX without needing this block here. I would show you, but I can't get the code to run, like the actual code to clone or open in the VS Code editor on GitHub. And I think it's because of the node modules folder. But yeah, that's one thing I would do. Going back over here, if we go to the components, we can look at the navigation. So the navigation is just, I'm assuming the top bar. Okay, so this is a bunch of Tailwind stuff. I think I've never used Tailwind. I don't really use CSS frameworks, but I'm assuming this is some Tailwind stuff. I don't know what this comment is saying, so maybe I would remove that. Oh, I see. Oh, it's supposed to say right side. So you do have a lot of typos in this project. It's not that big of a deal, but if anybody were to look at this, they would probably be less inclined to work on this project with you. If I mean, I think it's overall pretty decent, but the reason why I'm pointing out the things that are wrong is because when I do a code review, typically that's how it's going to go, is you want to try and get the person whose code you're reviewing to see where it can be improved. And that is kind of the goal of a code review in my eyes. This is the home page. So actually you're using Vite. I would be using Next.js personally. I think the structure is better. if you go to the components here, I think home.jsx is actually more like a page and not a component. And it's a page that renders a bunch of components, and it's rendering the hero, the overview, the blog section. So overall, the structure makes sense to me. I think that that's fine. Let's just have a look at maybe the blog post. Let's look at a blog. I think that was, what was that? That was single post. That is rendering. Okay, so you're using sanity on the back end, it appears. Okay, and this is saying if there is no post data, we're just going to render loading ... Okay, that's okay. Probably didn't have time to set up a like a super fancy loader, but I don't think anyone really cares about that too much, so that's fine. Using your indexes as keys is never really a good thing. I think from this post data, if you're getting it from sanity, and I'm going to zoom in, it's probably hard to see. Looking at this map here, you are building out some spans, and then you're using the index that you're getting from the map as the key. You don't need to do that, I don't think, because you have this post data. I'm going to assume, and this is totally an assumption, that this post data array, each of these posts probably has like a unique ID. I would use that unique ID for the key instead of the index. It is a bad practice. It's not something that's horrible, and sometimes you can get away with it, and sometimes, you know, people do it anyway. But if at all possible, you do not want to use the index for the key when you're mapping through and rendering JSX. All right, so overall, everything that's happening in here is totally easy to understand. The code itself is relatively clean. It's mostly the approach and the structure that I think could use a lot of work, and also making sure that you understand what should and should not be committed in a Git repo, and making sure that you're really careful not to include typos, because, for example, this typo here, it's going to be hard for you to fix that because this is a directory name. So you're going to have to put in some work to change that. And there's some other things, but I would also say include a slightly better README, and also put that link in the about. All right. So overall, again, thank you, Mike Fox, for letting me use your code for this review. Overall, again, I would definitely think that you are well on your way to creating a pretty awesome project there. And finally, we're going to look at JLarky React Lazily. So right off the bat, I'm seeing this is going to be it looks like a component library. So if I open that, indeed, this is a component library with what appears to be quite a lot of weekly downloads. So this must be a really helpful project. So it says here, React Lazily is a simple wrapper around react.lazy that supports named imports. So this is a component that's going to allow you to lazy load components using named imports. That's what it seems like to me. All right, these icons appear to be broken. Not a big deal, but it looks like you have a pretty good README. So I'm going to skim through this really quick. React Lazily is a simple wrapper. Okay, so that's the same thing that's in the about here. Consider that component. Okay, so already loving this. You have a description of what this thing does. You have use cases, and then you have why, full examples, why this solves the problems, and some related links at the bottom. This is a very well-structured README. This is exactly how I would want to see a project set up if I were to be working on a project or looking to hire somebody and I'm looking at somebody's code. This is a very well-structured GitHub landing page for the project in general. So kudos there. So it looks like what you do. Okay, so let's look at the use case. Consider that component myComponent is exported with export default myComponent. Then per the React docs, you could do const myComponent React. Okay, so you lazy load it. Very good. But if the component is exported with named exports, so non-default exports basically, then you have to do so you're basically importing it. It's a promise, so you're hooking into the then, and then you are passing in. Oh, I see. So I actually haven't dug too deeply into lazy loading in React, so I understand what this code is doing to about 85% of an extent, but enough to be able to review it, I think. With React Lazily, it becomes, okay, so it makes it way easier. You don't have to do all this. It just works like it would if you just used react.lazy. So this is syntactic sugar. It's a wrapper. Then you get a full example. So they included a full example here. Really happy about that. All right, so let's try to resize some things here. Using suspense and then importing React Lazily. We have a component that we're importing lazy loading. If we look at my component, we will see that it is a non-default export and that the app.tsx is indeed loading properly. And we can click that just to demonstrate that it does indeed work. So you have a really good demo. So far, there's really nothing for me to gripe about. I'm going to look at the code. In fact, I think so far this is definitely, I mean, it obviously is production level, production ready code because it has tons and tons of people using it, I think. So yeah, this is definitely production level code. I'm going to look at your rollup config really quick just to take a look. I like that it's not using a million imports because I've used rollup and I've seen other rollup projects, and typically in order to get things the way you want, there's probably like 40 imports at the top, but this is also much smaller of a project. So rollup is definitely a plugin based infrastructure. Okay, so clean code in my books, although the naming is good. You understand what everything is supposed to be doing. Looks good to me. LGTM. And let's see what the tests have in store. So you have a test for both loadable and lazily. If we look, shows loading for some random component. Shows loading. What do you mean by shows loading? Okay, I got you. So it shows that it loads. So it's just proving that it loads. It's basically that demo in test form. It's the exact same thing. It's that demo that we just looked at on the code sandbox, but just in test form. And then loadable shows loading for some random component. So it does, what's the difference between loadable and lazily? I probably missed what the difference is there. Let's go into the source folder and maybe I can find more information about it. We have loadable and we have core, loadable.ts and index.ts. If we look at the index, it's just exporting lazily. We'll get to that in a minute. I bet it's in core. Loadable is just exporting loadable. So in loadable, ts ignore. Okay, so that's one way to do it. I think another way you could do it is just declare it in an index.d.ts file, even though there's not a type, you can do it that way. But since this is such a small amount of code, I think this is absolutely fine to just add this ts ignore at the top, since you're not providing types, or this isn't providing types, I should say. So I need to look at the lazily aspect of this to see what the difference is between lazily and loadable, I think. So if we look at lazily, I'm just going to run through this. Function returns a new proxy, casting as unknown, get target component name or symbol. So, okay, this is definitely advanced. I'm not going to say it's advanced level code, but it's using advanced features of the language. So automatically, I think when I would see this, I would say, okay, this person is probably senior level. Just a guess. I have no idea. I'm assuming though. So if the component name is a string, if it's not, then I'm assuming it's just going to return void, like it's not going to do anything. That makes sense. It would be odd if it wasn't a string. I don't know what else it would be. Maybe a symbol, right? Yeah, it could be a symbol. So if it is a symbol, is that case just not handled? I would ask that question in the review if I was reviewing it, just because I would want to understand it. It's not a nitpick or anything like that. It's just I don't know, so I would ask. Then X is an array, or no, it's not an array. It is a map, an object, and component name. There's a lot of typecasting in here. I'm confused about that. Is that necessary? Or is it just because it's not worth putting in all the work to type all this stuff properly? Or is it necessary to cast all of this stuff? I mean, casting as unknown, casting as any. I feel like you don't have to do it that way. And you could probably make an improvement there, but otherwise this is very good code. And if we look at loadable, I don't know what loadable is doing. That could be just the fact that I need to spend more time looking at this code, or it could be that it's just generally, let's see, it might have said it in the readme. Interesting. Don't forget to install loadable component first. So it must, oh, I see. Is that kind of like, sorry, I'm having to understand what the loadable component is doing versus the lazily component. Loadable, is that kind of like suspense? Yeah, so what I would say is that part is a little bit confusing to me. Again, that could be just my side. I would ask questions about it in the review. Nothing here to nitpick. Very clean code. Really love how the landing page for the project is set up. And I really have nothing to really critique about it. So honestly, just good job on that. And with that being said, I think I'm going to call it a day for that. So that was pretty fun. Some of those didn't work out quite as I expected, but what I will say is that depending on, let me just step back a little bit. Learning to code is hard, right? So any of these frameworks that you are learning, it takes a lot of time. And the fact that any of these people were able to get as far as they did is already worth, in my opinion, an interview. So if you happen to be a employer watching this live stream or watching this on YouTube, I would reach out to some of these developers if they are currently seeking jobs. You saw their usernames on the GitHubs. Go reach out to them. I think that they would be really good and have a lot of potential to move up quickly into mid-level and then at some point senior level. Except for Jay Larkey here, who appears to actually already be a senior developer. I've seen some of their code before as well, so I have reason to believe that. But all of this was really fun, and I'm really glad that everybody was able to reach out to me and give me permission to review their code. So thank you so much for, being a part of this. If you are watching this on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe and like this video, and don't forget to follow me on Twitch so you don't miss any of this content. And I will see you all soon.